Good afternoon, good folks. Welcome to the City of Muskegon City Commission work session for this Monday, October 10th, 2022. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Emery,
Here.
Commissioner St. Clair,
Here.
Mayor Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Hood, absent, Commissioner Ramsey, absent, Vice Mayor German,
Here.
Commissioner Gorman.
Here.
Thank you. All right. We got a busy agenda tonight, so without further ado, let's get right to it. We got Transportation Asset Management Plan first up.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Commissioners. This is an item, it's the Transportation Asset Management Plan. It's an initiative we've been doing with our consultant, Prina Newhoff, who are going to give a presentation on some more of the details in a minute here. But I thought I would just give you just a little bit of background before that happens. We're here for a couple of reasons. One, this is a state requirement as a part of accepting Act 51 dollars for our roads and streets. But there are better reasons to do this. It also provides a good framework for sound decisions, provides a lot of data and indicators for our road network. And perhaps most importantly, we're going to work as soon as this plan is put in place to combine it with plans we have for our water, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer systems to develop a more comprehensive set of data and an asset management plan or an asset management strategy that looks at all of those assets all at once and makes decisions about projects in the context of all the different asset categories in each corridor. So that's kind of the background to it. I'm going to turn it over to Barbara Marzak from Prina Newhoff and Connie Hauk as well, and they will give you some more background and information. They're going to do a short presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, and thank you. I'm Barbara Marzak, and I am the team leader, office leader for our Muskegon office. And I've been here a couple of times before talking about asset management. So here we are again. Dan did a great introduction. You can turn this slide. Thanks. So I just wanted to mention that we've done some asset management planning previously. In 2017, we worked on the stormwater asset management and wastewater plan that was funded by a grant. 2018, we did the drinking water asset management plan, which was a requirement by the state. And then now here we are with, in 2022, actually, that's a typo, Transportation Asset Management Plan. And as Dan said, this is the first step. It was required to be submitted in October, so we're doing that now. But the next step is really to bring in the previous plans, which looks at the utilities. And again, to help make decisions on what projects should be done, what are the priorities, and what are the costs. So that's going to lead into, again, towards the end of this year, as in the comprehensive or coordinated asset management plan. So really the intent for asset management is, again, the desired level of service at the lowest life cycle cost. So one of the things we're trying to avoid is doing things on an emergency basis. It's really intended to hopefully save money by doing it in a planned, coordinated fashion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Connie. Connie is actually our team leader in our Cadillac office, but her expertise is in transportation, and she's done quite a few of these plans for various agencies throughout the state. So.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you, Barbara. So we are, go ahead and slide. As Dan mentioned, the Public Act 325 of 2018, that's the requirement of asset management plans for any agency that certifies over 100 miles of roadway. And these are the cities that are listed here that were in that group that gets to do this fun activity. So, along with all 83 of the road commissions. Okay, next. So the asset management plans this is for TMC, the Transportation Asset Management Council. And the elements of that is the asset inventory. We do the condition, location. We set performance goals of each of the elements. Talk about the risk of failure, talk about your revenue and expenditures. We have performance outcomes that we desire based on the funding level that you have, set up a multi-year program for your roads and bridges, and then the plan also discusses the coordination with other entities. And the final thing that needs to be completed before we submit the asset management plan to TMC is proof of acceptance. All right? So basically, the asset management plan, the local road agency has to make progress towards achieving the goals that are in your asset management plan on all of your federal aid eligible major street system by October of 2025. Right? So the asset inventories that we include in the compliance plan is the road assets, the bridge assets, your traffic signals, and your culverts. And this is an ongoing plan. We can update it anytime you want to. You're required to update it at least once every 3 years. So in the plan for the road system, we're going to talk about the roads first. We have the PACER ratings on all of the roads in your network, all of the federal aid eligible roads, and as many of the local roads as we can. You guys have 429 lane miles, which is 215 center line miles of roads. 40% are your city major streets and 60% are your city locals. So this plan, the map here, it's in the report, and your roads that are in good condition are in green, your yellows are fairs, and your reds are in poor condition based on PACER ratings. So looking at a pie chart of it, your major streets, you have about 42% in poor and 32% in fair and 25% in good. You can see the city locals, there's less funding for the locals, and that's about half and half between good, poor, and fair. We like to compare those a lot of times to the statewide federal aid roads, and you can see that your major network is very similar to the statewide condition. Through the process, we've put together all of your planned projects that you have. Those are in maps in the asset management plan, so we can take those into account on how much of the network is being improved each year. And we also run a gap analysis. That takes your funding into account, the fixes that you're using on your roads, and then how much of your network are we not getting to with the funding that's available. So in the asset management plans, we run through both the city majors, and which is the top of this, and the bottom part of the table is your city locals. So with that gap analysis, it's kind of shocking to look at, but it's basically, do we have enough money to do what we need to do with the system, right? We also run strategies. The program that we use is RoadSoft, and basically do some curves. We use curves that are predict the failure of the roads based on the type of pavement that you have, the age, the cracking that's happening on that road. And through this modeling, and you can see in the graphics of this, again, the green, yellow, and red is the good, fair, poor. And we put in different models based on how much funding. So this is an activity that we can go through to say, okay, if you're putting $4 million into your major roads right now, this is what your condition could look like in 5 years. We can push it out to 10 years. And that's what we do with the whole asset management plan. So with that, the team worked through some goals for your major roads. And I think the most important goal in there, besides maintaining or improving your road network through the life of this asset management plan, is we recommend introducing some preventative maintenance fixes to your roads. Get more life out of the roads that you have that are in good and fair condition so that they don't fall into the poor category as fast. Then on your local system, so this is something that we've had to do quite a few more strategies on. Currently, you're putting about $250,000 into your local road network, and basically what we have found with that is it's not enough of an investment for your local road system. You can see that over on the right-hand side again in the graphics, we did kind of push with some different options and some different fixes on the network to try to maximize and optimize what we could do with the roads with that type of funding. We also played around with what if we doubled the money, what if we had $2 million of millage money. So we ran through quite a few strategies through this. The goals for the local roads that the team came up with, again, is don't want roads to get worse than they are right now, at least to maintain that. We also recommend introducing preventive maintenance fixes to the roads as well in the local system. Increase funding for the city local road program. And set a goal of moving 3% of the local roads out of the poor into a higher category. So then I'm going to move on to bridges. This is an inventory of your bridge map. And you guys have 3 structures in the city right now. We did a gap analysis on that as well. And 2 of the bridges are planned for future demolition. And then Lakeshore, which is the bridge that is in good condition. That one we have put in some scheduled maintenance money on that just to keep it in good condition. So we have a goal for the bridges too, and basically extend the period of time that your bridges stay in good condition and remove those 2 bridges from the city system within the next 5 years. So that would give you a long-range goal of 100% of your bridges in good condition. And then the culvert assets, we have both the inventory and condition of those. And in the asset management plan, there's also goals for your culvert system as well. Traffic signal assets, the same thing. These are the locations of the traffic signals, and the goals are in the asset management plan. So this is the revenue and expenditure table. This isn't meant to be, a financial report in the asset management plan. It's basically a high-level assessment of the funding that you currently have and use. And then the final document of the asset management plan, there's both a proof of acceptance and there is a resolution in there. So those 2 are pieces that are required for submittal to TMC with your asset management plans.
I will just add that you saw the certification there at the end of the presentation. That certification and a resolution designating the mayor and Ken Grant, the finance director, to sign that certification are currently on the agenda for tomorrow evening. No major questions or concerns tonight, then this item, because it has to be submitted to the state this month, is on the agenda for tomorrow night.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions with regard to what's been presented tonight or is in our agenda packet for this work session? It's a lot of work that went into this. Thank you for this considerable undertaking. Not only given that it's required, by statute, but also it's something that we very much need as we are doing long-term asset management and planning. So this can be really, really helpful. What are we going to be revisiting this? This is more of a question for staff. Are we going to be revisiting this in terms of how we can develop new strategies to identify more resources, to put towards upgrading or reconstruction of our roads and streets, in particular local streets? It sounds like that's where we've got the least amount of resources going into presently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're always looking for additional funding in terms of federal grants, state grants, and other sources. Any money that we do obtain in grants, it's often designated for federal aid or major streets. What that does do is if we have a good amount of major funding in a year, we could move some down to local streets. It is harder to find grants for local streets. We receive significantly less Act 51 or gas tax money from the state for the local streets as well, as I'm sure many of you know. That's what makes it difficult to maintain those to the same level as the major streets. We are always looking for additional funding sources, and we certainly do, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, intend to, take this information, combine it with our other asset management plans, and begin to network more holistically, I suppose, than we have in terms of where utility projects and road projects might intersect, and where we can extend or make better use of those dollars in order to improve both systems at the same time. That being said, it is a challenge, certainly on the local level, and we would welcome your help in any efforts to increase funding.
All right, thank you. I'm certainly interested in having that better understanding as well as conversation of how we can develop a strategy to commit more resources. A number of ways we could potentially do that using our existing pools of revenue or trying to identify new sources of revenue. But I know that many people in our community would like to see more investment into our local streets. That's for sure. Did you have something that you wanted to add,
Yeah,
Ms. Mixell?
yes. I just wanted to mention that we've talked before about developing a long-term capital plan, and this is one of the major steps that we have to take first, so that we can really understand the condition of our system. But this is going to help us.
Okay. So could you maybe go into some top-level debriefing on that capital improvement plan, that overarching one where it looks at transportation, where it maybe look at our parks, where it might look at our DPW facilities or whatnot, so we can understand and get a good grasp on the totality of all of our assets and where do we have the most deficiencies, the most need for further investment, so we can prioritize as a team, staff and commissioners, where to put resources, focus on roads first versus somewhere else or vice versa.
Right. That's the goal of having this long-term capital plan, is to really understand the assets that we have and then develop a strategy for moving forward. Certainly one of the things that I encountered when I first arrived here was that we weren't even coordinating the road and the utility projects. So at least that's happening now. But, we really need to understand what we currently have and the condition of it, and then we can develop a strategy and put that into writing, so that every year when we're budgeting, we are choosing the right path forward.
Okay. Excellent. That's quite the undertaking, and I appreciate your work on that, and I appreciate our staff's work on that. Could we maybe expect at some point, I don't know how much of a heavy lift this would be, but something that showed our assets in totality, and if we were able to, and I know they had it on the transportation side and on the roads and the culverts, like if you put X amount of dollars annually, we can get to, X percentage of our roads at the major level and the local level, at good versus fair versus poor. Can we have, as part of that long-term planning, hey, if we continue investing X amount of dollars, increasing at the rate of inflation annually, we'll be able to knock off this capital project and this capital project and this capital project over the next decade or 2 decades, or the super long term, and then our community and our commission and our staff understands that long term process, and where someone can also look up, well, when is my road going to get repaired or replaced or reconstructed? Oh, it's on this dashboard or in this plan, and in 2028 is when your road's going to get addressed, if we have other resources.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's essentially our goal, is to really be able to look out into the future and plan better. I'd be hesitant to have a plan that was very much longer than 6 years, because things just change too quickly. So, we never know when funding's going to change, or, some new standards going to come into place. Now we're going to have to address those things, and that's going to take, a lot of our funding. For instance, drinking water and having to replace lines into every single property. So I would caution to look too far out, but that is the overall goal, to really understand all of our assets and the condition of them, so that we really can think about the best way to keep things moving along. And Connie makes a really good point that you want to keep things from falling into disrepair. So that's one of the things that we're aiming at with our parks too, is there was so many decades where we weren't investing in them, and so now it costs so much more to do the work. So, I mean, some things you can maintain and repair, and other things really just have to be replaced. But having a better understanding of those things and the timing of doing that work makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that definitely seems sensible. In a 6-year outlook, knowing that even things can change within 6 years, definitely more prone to changing beyond that. And yes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So where we can do preventative maintenance, all the better, for sure. So, thanks so much, commissioners. Any questions? Come to the top. All right, you can always follow up with staff if any questions do surface. But are you about to ask some? Okay, I thought you might have wanted to ask something or say something.
Where's my red hat? No.
All right, thanks so much, and don't go anywhere.
Okay.
You're for the next presentation as well, I believe. No. Oh.
Different consultant.
Oh, okay, different consultant. Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but take care and be well. All right, Mr. Vanderhyde, we're going on to stormwater management ordinance and another presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is another one of those large overarching things that's been happening for some time. About a year ago, an effort was begun to take management of our own stormwater reviews in particular back within city, back within our own staff and with our consultants' help. We have been using the County Drain Commissioner's standards since about 2016, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a city effort. So the city has always been responsible for stormwater reviews within our limits, but we made the decision to use the County Drain Commissioner's office essentially as our consultant to do those reviews for many years. They, in turn, used ENG. Ryan McInhill is here with me to answer any technical questions that I cannot. But they in turn used ENG to do those reviews. About a year ago, our former manager began an effort to take that process in-house, not necessarily setting aside ENG. In fact, they've been a great partner both in terms of continuing the reviews for us and also helping us with the documents that you have this evening. But the administrative portion of maintaining those stormwater reviews back in-house with the goal of increasing responsiveness to developers and reducing the burden on the drain commissioner. The drain commissioner had some issues with based on their financial structure and staffing levels that they weren't able to accommodate the reviews really at the level that we were hoping for, and so we have begun to take that back into house. So what you have tonight then is the culmination essentially of that effort. It is an ordinance that replaces our current stormwater ordinances to make it the city's legal obligation and to put in place all of the rules and ordinances necessary to let us do that. And then also included in your packet is the larger of the two things, which is a standards document that was actually initially prepared by a group out of the Grand Rapids area and has since been adopted by most of the communities in West Michigan, including in a different, in the same format and with the same or virtually the same technical content by the Drain Commissioner and other communities in our county, but it has been customized for the city, specific to our ordinance and to our desires for the technical content. From a developer's perspective, they'll see virtually no change, especially to how it's been operating over the last year as we worked to get these documents prepared and in place, but really no change in terms of technical content, even from 2016. What they will, we hope, notice, and what we think they have already noticed, is a little bit quicker response time and a little bit more customer service in terms of our forward-facing approach to the reviews as they see them. I have Ryan here in terms of technical questions. I know that it's a lot of paperwork, and it seems like a big item because it's a new ordinance and a new standards manual and so forth, but again, it is really just a change on the letterhead from the Drain Commissioner's office performing our stormwater reviews to the city performing the stormwater reviews, and behind the scenes, ENG as our stormwater consultant has been consistent throughout that process. So I guess not knowing exactly where you all would like to go in terms of how deep and technical you'd like to get on this, I welcome your thoughts, comments, and questions.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Commissioners? Any questions on this item about the prospect of rescinding our previous ordinance or resolution giving authority over oversight and permitting of stormwater sewers to our county drain commissioner and bringing that back in-house in concert with a consultant? All right. I'll say, and I spoke with our deputy manager, Mike Zell, last week about this, that I have some reservations. In terms of just recent history, where we had taken oversight and permitting with regard to critical dunes and development in critical dunes in-house and away from the state that had overseen that, and we'd relied upon a consultant as part of that permitting, and it didn't go so well. Processes didn't go so well. Results or outcomes didn't go so well. And so it leaves me a bit leery about doing that here again. I did understand in talking with Ms. Mikesell that our capacity is different with regard to this relative to critical dunes and permitting in critical dune areas, and that we don't have that expertise on the one hand, but we do have more expertise and internal capacity with regard to engineering around stormwater management. So that gives me a little bit greater level of comfort in that regard. What can we say to what can you say and our team say to reassure any of my concerns as well as others in our community that may have those same concerns in that regard, that we're going to be diligent in adherence to state laws and all the protections surrounding this matter, and then we're going to be consistent and we're going to be consistent and diligent and not allowing corners to be cut, because we know some developers are going to push us because they want, they ask, they push. Are we going to hold firm and strict and consistent with the letter of the law?
Sure. So first, I guess I'll just reiterate that this is something that has always been the city's responsibility, and there is no one we can delegate it to in terms of the legal authority. We can certainly have the Drain Commissioner or other partner organizations consider managing it on our behalf, but it is different from the critical dune ordinance in that case the state has the obligation to manage it and we accepted it on their behalf. In this case, we have the obligation to manage this program, and any delegation would be us choosing to use an outside organization or partner to do that work on our behalf. The ultimate responsibility in this case lies with us. Having said that, I would agree with you that we are in a different capacity, I suppose, in this particular instance. I personally was on the committee in a previous job when I worked for the city of Kentwood. I was on the committee that developed the draft example ordinance and the draft example manual that's in front of you. I was on that committee with about 10 other folks, partner agencies from the city of Grand Rapids. We hired Fishbeck, a consultant, to help us draft the specifics of the documents, but me, the city of Grand Rapids, the city of Walker, and several other organizations in Kent County developed these materials from scratch, essentially. They've since been used by many other counties in West Michigan, including our county, and so we have I have an intimate knowledge of the documents that are before you. We also have a great partner in ENG, and I'd be happy to let Ryan come up and talk a little bit about the experience that they have, the number of reviews that they have done for us and for others, and the work that they've done. With the background that on the critical dune permitting, there is an ordinance at the state level, that sets up the rules, and then they essentially just walk away. And we were relying on our consultant in that case to interpret statutes and ordinances and laws virtually all the time. And in this case, there, as you can see in your packet, there are hundreds of pages of technical reference manuals and documents that back up these reviews and give developers, the information and the tools that they need to know not only how to design these features, but when we review them, where our reviews are coming from, and where we're referencing the same documents and the same standards that they are when we prepare those reviews. So, Ryan, did you want to just briefly give a statement about ENG's role, especially in Muskegon County here?
Yeah, so these standards that that Dan worked on back in 2016 when he was with the city of Kentwood, they were all based on guidelines from Eagle that they wanted to see. So there's a lot of specific criteria, whether it's a water quality component, we have a channel protection component, we also have a flood control component. So to be honest with you, there was a lot of painful reviews at the start because this was a brand new mechanism and technique for all these engineers to learn on a private development side for what is expected now from Eagle to meet the MS4 permits of all these urbanized communities. So since that time, obviously, 6 years have gone by since then. And these standards or some variation of them have been adopted throughout West Michigan. And so pretty much every community has some variation of what's in front of you today. I think to get to your question about being consistent, I think from our perspective, that's the biggest and most important thing that we can do. And we, as a consultant, obviously, need to make sure that we're consistent from review to review. We're just making sure that the standards are being adhered to, and we're making comments that are addressed to the municipality, whether or not they are meeting that requirement or they're not, so that we can take an objective review. And then there are times, certainly every site is unique. There are certain challenges that go with every site. And there may be cases where you can't meet a certain one of the criterion to the T. So there's always some back and forth, and usually always when that situation happens is we're working with the municipality to say, they've done their best, this is what they can do, and we're getting, confirmation from them. I guess the other point is that as a consultant, we're not issuing approval letters. We are simply taking the stormwater standards, offering our comments to the municipality, and then they ultimately are the ones that are drafting approval letters. That is not something that we are doing. So there's certainly, and just to go to Dan's point, this has always been, the MS4 permit has always been a city permit. This wasn't a Muskegon County MS4 permit. It's always been a City of Muskegon MS4 permit. There was the post-construction requirements that were basically appointed to the Water Resource Commissioner to take over that certain aspect of the MS4. So now what's in front of you today is just taking that specific portion and just taking it back under the city's jurisdiction to be able to do that. And that's why we have to update all these MS4 documents and get the permit back to the standards where Eagle can issue or reissue a permit.
All right, thank you. And could you provide your full name for our clerk and the record?
Yep, Ryan McInhill with ENG.
All right, thank you, Mr. McInhill. And thank you, Deputy Director Vanderheid. I appreciate the clarity and that context, which is both helpful and reassuring. And then there is also, for further reassurance for our community, there's also an additional audit process that the state can pursue and does pursue on a periodic basis.
That's right. Yep. They will come and audit any and all agencies throughout the state that administer these programs. And if they see any violations or things that concern them, then they'll bring them to our attention, and perhaps it's just an interpretation issue that we'll fix going forward, or perhaps it'll be a document change and we'll be back before you to discuss what that is and why. I think, again, we're in a very good position taking it over. We've got a great set of reference documents here. We've got a great consultant and great knowledge, not only myself at the city, but Joel Brookins, our assistant city engineer, has been involved in the program for a couple of years now as well. So plenty of knowledge to help get through it.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And you're sure right. We have plenty of documents here and technical references as well from which to work. So thank you again. Commissioners, any final questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, I have a question. So would permits approved from us now still need to pass through the county level or not?
In most instances, no.
Okay.
If it drains to a city storm sewer, we're completely on our own. If it
Okay.
goes through a county drain or some other things, then they may be involved, but the ultimate authority will rest with us.
Okay. I'm just trying to think again to your point, Mayor. Just from the developer's perspective, like what changes, where could there be hoops that they're going to jump through that we want to make sure they're aware of? So yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you much. And then you'll be working on bringing a resolution to the commission to bring this into effect.
Yes, this is not on the agenda for tomorrow evening, but it will come, if not in 2 weeks, then sometime very soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, next up, we have special events policy changes. And we have our events coordinator, Ms. Jackie Ernie, with DPW. Welcome.
Evening. Thank you. Well, I'm happy and exhausted to report that we had 152 special event permits in the city of Muskegon in 2022. It's been fun and festive all over town. It's fun to see the diversity and the excitement around town. With that also comes the strain of providing a high level of service to this quantity of events and maintaining the regular staff schedule that we need to do. We've also helped a lot of, I'll say, non-special events that are on private property that might be privately held. For example, if a church needed picnic tables, a lot of times we would provide those, so that's not included in this number. As part of preparation for this meeting, I held 2 event meetings focused on downtown events. That's been a high point of discussion for the frequency of when Western Avenue is closed, and we don't want to negatively impact our businesses and residents, and so we sought their feedback on how downtown events impact them. So from those 2 meetings, I had some feedback of things that I can control at my level of just better communication or different ways to access that communication, the way that street signs are posted and making sure I follow up with events. Other concerns that were mentioned were noise, parking, tourist navigating, cross streets when Western Avenue is closed, and excess traffic on cross streets like Clay and Webster. Many of the businesses recognize that what is good may not be, what is best for all. Something that positively impacts a small retail business would be something like Lakeshore Art Festival, but Rebel Road will negatively impact our small retail businesses. And so just to keep that in mind when we're looking at closing Western Avenue, it can't be beneficial for all, but can we find that balance? Western Avenue was closed 15 times during the event season, and so I went through with each event and discussed those with the businesses and residents to see if there's a certain type of event that impacted them, and positively overall or negatively. In conclusion, while we're trying to find this new balance of downtown events and how often Western Avenue is closed, staff's considering seeking alternate routes for 5Ks, just because there didn't seem to be a positive impact for our businesses. While it creates a lot of time for police and DPW staffing. And so we have a beautiful lakeshore trail, beautiful beach, lots of great other cross streets that we can look at alternative routes to start reducing the number of time Western Avenue is closed in a season. In the packet, I addressed the new special event policy that we're proposing, and I was seeking your feedback on. So to give you a little bit of history, in 2021, staff proposed the first fee waiver policy. That was to get events back on their feet after COVID. And so in 2022, we proposed staff approving up to $2,500 in fee waivers as long as certain criteria were met, because you guys were getting so many fee waiver requests. So we started waiving some at the staff level. So for 2023, I put in the policy waiving parade event fees for veterans, having additional fee waivers for neighborhood associations, and waiving application fees for nonprofits for 2 years, so that way they can start to onboard their new event, but then eventually would incur the full cost of having a special event. So of the 14 fee waivers that happened this year, several would still be eligible under this policy change to receive those fee waivers, but not everybody that did. So what do you think about removing the fee waiver policy, but just adapting this new paragraph that I had, addressing just permanent changes?
I support that. I think that's fair to, again, if you're a nonprofit wanting to try something new, you have an opportunity for 2 events, hopefully, to make it work. And I think some of our long-standing events are at a point in their event life where they can afford that.
Excuse me. That
Vice
was
Mayor
for
Jones.
veterans and nonprofits, and it was another one. What was the other?
Neighborhood associations.
Neighborhood
So
association.
right now, neighborhood associations get 1 application fee waiver per year, and the new policy we're proposing is to allow for 2 application fees, but also 2 event fees. So their rental of Smith Ryerson or the request for picnic tables would be included. A lot of them right now use it on an Easter egg hunt. So we thought that would open up another opportunity for like the Easter egg hunt, and for them to do another one that city staff would help support financially.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable and a good gesture from the city to work with these organizations and neighborhood associations and our veterans who serve this country and come back and want to see or do something in the community. So I can support that as well.
Wonderful.
So, it didn't dawn on me in reading this over that you were replacing our fee waiver policy by that one line, up to 2 application fees may be waived for a nonprofit organization located in the city of Muskegon in its lifetime. So it didn't necessarily dawn on me that, that one sentence
Sure.
was nullifying a separate policy in its,
Sure.
in its entirety. So it's just dawning on me right now that that's the case. At first blush, I was going to say I liked everything about this. I was like, this is a great changes. Like, I really like having, including the parade event fees for veterans groups and application fees for veterans groups remaining there, and then giving an additional application event fee waiver for our neighborhood associations. I like that. And then the other changes, which maybe we'll be getting into in
Yep.
a moment, I thought were good. And did you include the existing policy in here? I don't see it. I guess I'm going to want to,
The existing fee waiver policy?
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess I'm going to just want to take a look at that.
Sure.
Again.
And that's why I didn't put it on tomorrow's agenda. I planned on the second meeting in October.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of any cases. I mean, we can still, on a case-by-case
I know.
exception. I'm just trying to think of any cases where, we really don't want to, like, hard 2 maximum. You're never going to get a waiver again. If there are, special extenuating circumstances where we may want to continue giving some kind of reduction.
Is there like a certain circumstance that you're thinking of, or just in general want to have an opportunity available?
Yeah, it's tough because in one case that I think of is Rebel Road, and with all the proceeds of that going towards the Child Abuse Council, and that serves our community. Many families in our city benefit from that. And so that's where I'm more inclined to say, yeah, let's continue providing them some level of relief in the fees on a regular basis. But there are a lot of good causes out there at the same time too that are like, well, we're a nonprofit, or this is benefits so and so, where do you distinguish? Where do you call the line?
I hear you.
And that's why I can understand why you're saying, here, let me make it easy for you. We're going to give you up to 2 max for any organization, any nonprofit, and that's that. After 2 years, you should be well established enough to be self-sustaining and know that these are what the costs are. And then I also understand from staff's perspective, like, we're providing a service. Like, we should be compensated. We're not trying to profit off this, but we should be compensated for the service we're providing, so that we're not subsidizing, one event after another, after another, after another, after another. Especially when we hear feedback from some folks in our community about how some of these events negatively impact their lives or their livelihoods. So I can understand why some residents might be incensed. And thank you for being proactive and holding those meetings and engagement with our community, with business owners and property owners and residents, to help get their various different perspectives of how all these different events impact them, so that we can be mindful of that going forward. So thank you. I appreciate that.
It was my pleasure.
Ms. Meixell.
I guess I just want to also make the point that, she did share the number of events that we're having. And so not only are we trying to cover the costs of our services, but we're being asked to provide more and more services. And so we need to understand the impact that that has on our budget, because when staff are working on this, they're not working on other things.
And that's every special event waiver application as well, because we don't charge a fee for that application, do we?
Yes,
The $100 application fee.
For the special, for a review of whether or not to waive the fee.
correct.
Oh,
Like,
correct.
there's not
No.
an extra.
No.
Like, we're doing that work to
Yep.
determine if they should get a waiver.
Correct.
On all the different service charges and whatnot as well. So, yeah.
But,
Okay, I'm comfortable.
Every event needs some service.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I'm just saying
We're
is, like,
providing it.
we're doing that extra work. If we keep the existing policy in place, we're doing that extra work. To determine whether or not to give you a discount.
Right.
Whereas if we
Right.
just apply this new policy, it's simple, it's straightforward. You can get up to 2 lifetime, period.
And that way,
Use it wisely.
an event isn't contingent upon or waiting upon the determination of their application. They know it up front. This is what we're able to waive fees for.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's sensible.
One other question there. Now,
Vice Mayor
also, thanks, Mayor. With these events and the waiver of the fee, does that include the, I guess, like picnic tables and DPW coming out to get rid of trash and all of that stuff as well?
Sure. So in this current proposal, it would be the parade event fees for veterans, the 2 event fees for neighborhood associations, but for the nonprofits, it's their application fee. So if they needed to rent Hackley Park, which is $50 a quadrant, they would still be paying the $50, but they're not paying the $100 to apply.
Okay. And all the other services that are
Correct.
comes with that. Okay. Free, right?
Not the event fees.
Oh, no, okay.
So just the application fee.
Just the application. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes,
So this
Commissioner Berman.
is, oh wait, 2 application fees for a nonprofit organization located in the city. So it's the nonprofit located in the city or the event located in the city, or you know what I mean? Like if there's a nonprofit outside the city that's like, well, I'm bringing my event to your city.
No,
and
I
do
intended
great
it for
work.
be a nonprofit organization located in the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, right?
I see you mulling it over.
Yeah.
Because if you're, if you're a nonprofit doing great work, bringing an event to our city,
And then how do you determine that? Like, is it
I know.
the board of the event and like
Right.
the majority of the board members exist in the city, but maybe they're, I don't know. That's, huh?
You just want nonprofit, period?
I just want us to talk about it because I think it could be,
That's a good question.
yeah.
Yep.
I my first inclination is to make it broader, of saying, for a nonprofit organization located in the city of Muskegon or a nonprofit putting on an event here, or we just say a nonprofit putting an event here because it's regardless of
Right.
where they're located. I would actually also like to clarify that when we say up to 2 application fees may be waived for all other nonprofit organizations, because we're just distinguishing that from our veteran groups and our neighborhood associations, right?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess I would want to say add that for all other.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
So
just
there's not-
nonprofits, it doesn't matter their location.
I don't know. Yeah.
I guess I would like to understand the implications.
We don't have many. I'd have to go through the list, but just thinking out, we don't have many that are not located in the city of Muskegon. Most nonprofits that are throwing an event are located in the city. But thinking about it, so No More Sidelines is a nonprofit I'm familiar with in Norton Shores. If they wanted to throw an event at Smith Ryerson to do like a field day, I think that that would be an example, right, of a worthwhile cause to support. So I understand where you're coming from and happy to continue getting feedback.
I think there's an appeal of if you're a nonprofit located outside the city but wanting to serve our residents, supporting them in those efforts. But also then the other way though is the incentive are about nonprofits that are located in the city or want to locate in the city. I don't know.
What if they serve City of Muskegon residents?
Yeah, I think that might make a difference. So you're not gonna relocate your nonprofit in the city to get 2 in the lifetime of your organization. 2.
And I don't think we want to discourage
No.
people from doing things in the city.
Agree.
So we could use language of for all the nonprofit organizations that serve City of Muskegon residents. Is that sensible?
I'm comfortable with that.
Compromise.
Yeah.
The other changes were a little bit more minor than this one, so I'm going to group them together. I have a $50 fee for road closures that are over 2 blocks, which currently only applies to Western Avenue, is the only road that's been closed for more than 2 blocks. And that would just account for the additional staff time spent cleaning up or for the additional equipment rental that it takes once you close over 2 blocks. We've gotten a lot more requests for cones and for snow fencing, so I just wanted to highlight that fee instead. And then the other one is when paid beach parking was first introduced, the event policy was amended to allow time for events to get used to the paid parking, so we included some free parking passes for them at that time. At that time, when we presented it, we said we would reconsider that in 2 years, and it's been 2 years. And so we're recommending to remove the free passes for Pierre Marquette events.
And can you explain? At first blush, I was like, "Well, why are we doing that?" And Manager Mike Sell explained it well to me. I was like, "Okay, that's sensible." Can you explain it to the commission, or maybe you want to share with the commission what you told me in terms of how it's worked out trying to distribute these in the past?
Yeah, we've found that the events don't necessarily distribute the passes to the people that are volunteering for their event, and so people then end up getting tickets, and then they want to talk to the police about, hey, I was volunteering for this event, I shouldn't have to pay for parking, they told me I wouldn't have to, and then we're deciding whether we're waiving that or not. It just creates all this extra work that nobody really needs. And, we all know that our parking fees are quite reasonable. So it just ended up being a bigger hassle, and it wasn't, I don't know, that it was providing the benefit that anyone thought that it would.
Yeah. Well, those are good insights. Thank you.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm comfortable with your proposed modifications.
Did you see anything else in the policy that you would like to see changed?
What is the change on the snow fence?
Oh, I just changed it. It's still available,
Okay.
but we just listed some of the frequently used items up front. The rest is in the user fee schedule, or I go through each event and ask them what services that they need. So if they ask for fencing, we can go through what options we have.
Okay.
We just didn't get hardly any questions about using snow fencing, or if we did, it was in inappropriate areas like Hackley Park
Okay.
or a parking lot, that you can't really use it. But we got a lot of requests for grab cones and regular cones, and so I wanted to
Interesting.
make those fees known up front, so that way
Okay.
they just had easy access to the
Yeah, I've
information.
been, I should connect with you. Parties in the Park is no longer going to rent our fence because of the condition of the fence and also just the labor on the board. So I don't know if that's going to impact that request or not, but
That's good to know, yeah.
yeah.
Re-looking at what fence we could have, because I know a lot of events use it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions or comments on this item?
So I'm clear. If we have some awesome event come to Pierre Marquette and they need 10 parking passes because of whoever's coming with them, we are standing firm and saying no, just pay for parking that day. Okay.
Oh, it's an expense they're
I'm
going to
fine
have to
with that.
build
I just-
into their event.
And then the only other thing I want to do is touch on our first 2 cannabis events held on city property. We've had 2, if you didn't know. We had one at Marsh Field about 2 weeks ago. It was a relatively small event. We had a couple minor site maintenance items come up with staff, but other than that, I didn't receive much feedback from the event. The other event was at Trinity Health Arena in August. That event was not managed as well, and we had some frustrations at the staff level that Manager Mike Sell, myself, and the manager of the arena had a meeting with the event to discuss the frustrations and issues that we had to try and work better in the future. But the most important piece for you all to know is that we learned you can't serve alcohol and cannabis in the same licensed space. So when it comes to Trinity Health Arena, we have one liquor license that's shared between both restaurants and the arena, so it's the space as a whole that is considered the licensed area. So you cannot compartmentalize the restaurants from the arena. So in an event like a cannabis event, once cannabis is introduced, the restaurants are no longer allowed to serve alcohol. So that impacts their revenue and their loss of revenue. They cannot operate during a cannabis event. At least they can't serve alcohol, and they've indicated with how much revenue they'd lose by not serving alcohol, they wouldn't be open. So I just wanted to give you a recap of those 2 events and see if you had any questions about cannabis events on city property.
What would happen right now, I guess? Where are we at if we did get a request for cannabis event in the arena? I guess where are we at right now if what to do with that request?
Sure. Staff had a meeting. Our recommendation would be technically the whole parcel that the arena is on is zoned, and so that back parking lot between the arena and Shoreline Drive could be utilized to consume and sell cannabis without effects inside. Otherwise, there could be a very large fee that could be paid
Okay.
for the loss of revenue to the restaurants. It would probably be to the amount that would be deterrent to a lot of events being able to hold
Okay.
a cannabis event effectively. But that's
Yeah.
where I would turn it over.
Okay. Thank you.
you. Yep.
Thank you for handling that gracefully too. I know it was tense for some business owners. Certainly not the intention of this commission to tell them how to run their business when there's a special event. So I'm glad we got through it. So thank you though for listening to them and being respectful of the feedback they had to give.
Indeed, it was a learning process for all of us,
Yes.
Including the event organizer. I'm glad that he had applied some lessons learned to his next one. I did not hear issues or concerns or problems from that one. But if someone were to the point of your question, if someone were to apply for a permit to hold a cannabis consumption event at an arena, that would ultimately still come to the commission for approval if we maintain the arena with that designated zoning. We could decide to rescind that zoning if we so choose. And I'm open to that conversation. I don't know if that's the most optimal site for these type of events. Particularly, I don't want to give anyone. If we're not going to be using the inside of the arena, there's limited space outside of the arena. I'm interested in potentially considering adding the farmers market with this zoning, with caveats that it's only can be used on specific
Right.
days with all sorts of appropriate parameters and rules
Limitations.
that staff sets up, which is going to be limiting when it's used, but it's still available. For instance, the organizer that did it in Marsh Field, who was presenting it as a farmer's market. Well, let's have it at an actual farmer's market that is set up and well situated for that type of activity. So I'd be open to further discussion and consideration of how do we continue to evolve accommodating of consumption events in our city. But yeah, I'm less keen on the continued use of the arena for consumption events. So, any other questions or comments on this item? All right. Well, thanks so much
Thank you.
for the updates and, like Commissioner Berman said, navigating that issue, which it was a learning process for all of us, and we learn and we live and we get
You get better.
better. Exactly. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have marijuana ordinance, talking about cannabis, marijuana ordinance, and our Muskegon Social Equity Program. Manager Franzik, welcome.
Good evening. A couple things I wanted to touch on tonight. We did have our cannabis conference summit early this year where we had all the cannabis industries talk about what they'd like to see. I also want to go over the social equity program. We do have quite a bit of funding for the grants section, over $60,000. We've approved 2 or 3 of those so far. My initial thought is I think we're going to have trouble spending that money the way it's listed now for the requirements. Most of these grants, if you look, you have to have a marijuana conviction. A lot of people that are inquiring about this do not. And there's one company we're working with now, Higher Learning, that focuses on training people to work into the cannabis industry. So they might not have any experience at all in growing or retail sales or processing, but we do have a lot of people locally that want to get into the industry. And I think when we had this money at first, our hopes was we want to get local people into ownership and be a part of this business. But as we're seeing, it's really not a mom and pop shop type industry. These are all big corporations that are running these. So I think it might be more worthwhile to amend our restrictions on this and open it up to social equity applicants. So in order to qualify for social equity status by the state of Michigan, you have to meet one of 3 criteria. Either a residency in a disproportionately impacted community for at least 5 cumulative years. That would be the city of Muskegon is one of those communities. A misdemeanor or felony conviction of marijuana-related offense. Or you had to be registered as a primary caregiver for at least 2 years between 2008 and 2017. Now, initially I thought it would be a good way to go, but I'm thinking we might want to loosen it a little more to where they don't necessarily need that status from the state of Michigan, but if they can prove to me and our staff that they meet those, if they meet one of those 3, that we can do so. And the reason I'm thinking we shouldn't require them to go to the state is because many of the people that have social equity status are looking to get into a growing license or a retailer's license. So a few of the people that are applying to take these courses haven't even done so, and they wouldn't want to unless they were opening a business. So I think my recommendation would to amend these to either have a social equity status by the state of Michigan or prove to city staff that you meet one of these three criteria. And I did include our grants application. You can see the 5 different grants you can apply for. Most of them are similar. You have to have eligibility, or you have to have been a resident 12 out of 48 years and have a previously low-level marijuana conviction. Marijuana equipment grant was a little different. I'm not sure how we settled on that, but you could have either had a previous low-level marijuana conviction or be designated as a social equity applicant. So that one, have the social equity applicant. I think that's because some of the caregivers probably were at our work session and probably spoke to that.
Now, this business startup loan, that is not, the expectation for that is not just a startup loan for a cannabis-oriented business, but any
Correct.
type
We
of business?
did want to give
Okay.
one grant for somebody that may have been affected by prohibition, but don't necessarily want to get in that industry, but have other business ideas.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. Because when we first established this program, one of the intents conveyed was helping those that had been negatively impacted by prohibition, whether directly because they had been prosecuted or incarcerated or charged, or indirectly, perhaps they had a parent that was incarcerated, and so they had an absence of a parent due to prohibition. And so the intent was to provide supports to such people that had been negatively impacted by prohibition, and not just so they could get into the cannabis industry, although some may wish to, but to provide potential education or capital for business startup, whether cannabis or otherwise. So. And I remember at the time, and of course things can change. This has been a number of years since we established this program. But I remember at the time that we established the program, we were intentional in not just mimicking the state social equity program of putting our own touch to it, so to speak. Although it can get confusing because some people are like, well, I'm a social equity candidate or through the state, so I should qualify for this, but because we are a little bit more restrictive, it does cause some confusion and also then consternation at the same time. So I can understand why the impetus and why you would suggest to us perhaps bring it into alignment with that state program. Now, Commissioners, what are your questions or thoughts on this item? Vice Mayor German.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Francis. This is something that we've talked about before, and getting familiar with this social equity initiative and talking with owners and entrepreneurs that want to be part of the marijuana industry. I think the consistency, having it aligned with the state guidelines, pretty much levels the playing field in my eyes. Having that status, and also the question about now the training, you mentioned higher learning. I got a chance to talk with the individual who owns that institution. One of the concerns was when would I guess grants, could they still apply for grants at this juncture now to move forward with the training now?
Yeah, I have been in contact with them, and I did receive 2 separate applications for people that wanted to get into the Higher Learn program. I did have to hold off until we discussed this. but I was a little concerned because talking with one of the gentlemen setting this up, he said, well, I sent you a whole list of people and they're already under class. When do we get refunded? And I said, that's not how it works. You've got to get approved first.
Right.
Apparently their sessions have already started, but it's a 2-session course. So if it costs $5,000 again for the second session, we can certainly step in. But I did want to reiterate to them that you got to get approved first before you can start telling the people that you're even approved. I haven't even gotten an application for those people. It's just a group of names he sent me. But I think we can work all that stuff out. I think it's a good program. One thing I might be a little concerned is there seems to be a lot of interest in this, which is great. But that might eat all of our funding up. So maybe we want to limit that amount. If it's going to take off that fast, I would hate to have all the grant money go just towards that and not to any business. Maybe we put a cap on that, $2,500 maybe.
How many, I guess, students would be able to attend maybe, or are you saying a cap of 25? Now, I guess the 5,000 covers the exactly whole course of the program.
But we would only be able to fund about 12 people a year, and then that would leave no more grant money left for anybody else. So, program.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want our money to only go
Yeah. Okay.
fine. It's really hard to tell who's
Yeah,
going to apply
yeah.
for what. So,
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor German. Commissioner St. Clair?
Thanks. I really like the idea of us being able to be more flexible with this. I'm wondering, this higher learning, if we have a track record that they have. Is it a new entity?
yeah, it's pretty new, and I do definitely want to do some more research on it because they don't have a location now. You know, the Green Moon's Garden gentlemen who are working with them are talking about opening up an actual school at their facility, which is great. But right now, you know, they've started, but they don't have a facility there. It's all being done online. So I just really want to make sure that, you know, we do the research, show that it's accredited, come up with some type of system where we know that they're in class doing the work and that they can send information to us that they're passing the courses and we'd be in
I appreciate that. I think there could be a lot of opportunity for good or bad that could come out of this if we're not careful. So,
Thank you, Commissioner St. Clair. Did you have something, Ms. Mixell?
I was just going to say that, you know, we have a tuition reimbursement program for our employees, and we could probably follow some of those same guidelines where, you know, it's a reimbursement program and you have to show that you completed the class and what grade you got and that before you get your payment back. So,
Thank you for that context. So I see with regard to the Educational Training Scholarship, presently it requires applicants filing a free application federal student aid, so FAFSA, and received eligible federal aid, and this scholarship will cover any remaining balance. So we're looking at making a modification of that as well. And then the applicant must pass the course to be eligible for reimbursement, which is just like what you're saying, how we do with the internally with staff.
Yeah, the FAFSA thing, that might be a little tricky with higher learning. I don't.
Yeah, I think that's more pertaining to the educational side of educational scholarship versus training supports is a little bit different.
Yeah. Maybe that should be for an accredited college or university. Or where applicable, we could just mention.
yeah.
And I would be inclined to your question of like whether or not to limit the grants or, you know, segment the total bucket that we have, which is approximately $60,000. What you're saying right now, set aside for the grants for educational or business startups, to kind of segment that so not all of it is being tied up in just one aspect of it. Because I personally would like to see resources go towards business support of helping people with startups. And if possible, even with an intention of helping folks establish non-cannabis businesses in our cannabis district. Because I don't think we want to see, and we talked about this before, and it is more expensive to operate within the cannabis district.
Right.
We would like to see that business district build out and become more than just cannabis, but have businesses that are complementary there as well. So I don't know, thoughts. That's to you, Mr. Franzik.
I share your sentiment. You have applicants for businesses every year so far. We've had 2 or 3 this year. I'd probably expect a couple more by the time the fiscal year is over. And but again, I would like to see local people trained in the marijuana industry.
How do we make it known that these resources are available for someone in our city who wishes to start a business, whether it's getting into cannabis or whether it's starting a non-cannabis business?
Well, oftentimes, just in the planning department, we receive calls on wanting to open a business or funding opportunities. We have all the information on our website, and it's really spread by the word of mouth. Everybody in the cannabis industry, I believe, knows about this as well, so it spreads that way. Same as any of other incentives listed on the website, and work directly with the business owner to try to meet their needs.
Okay. What would you suggest if we were to say, segment that and say no more than half could be used for any one activity, or no more than a third of these resources in that bucket can be used for any one activity? Or do you have a suggestion for how to regulate that?
I think segmenting it would be good, but maybe there's some provision where if you're in the 3rd quarter of the fiscal year and it hasn't been spent, then it's fair game for everybody.
Okay.
And then we go back to a waiting list. Who's on our waiting list?
I like that.
I like that idea.
Good idea.
Okay.
I'm not sure how we've approved all this in the past. I don't remember if we just okayed it here, if I came back for an actual commission meeting with a typed up document. Which probably
it'd come back. The commission was very keen and interested throughout this process. So it kept on coming back for review, and I think we discussed it at a work session and it would get put on a consent agenda, just
Then
kind
we
of
vote
our
for
final commission stamp of approval. It's like, yep, we're cool with this. We're okay with this program.
What I could do is, at a subsequent commission meeting where you vote, is come up with a revised document that shows that certain amount of money will be broken up for different types of grants. Once we hit the 3rd quarter, we will then go to a waiting list, and whoever was first on the waiting list can get their application looked at.
So, okay, that's well and good. As part of that, perhaps I would say for the educational component and the training component, be more flexible for the business startup money, where it's potentially considerable more dollars that you have access to. If we could keep that tighter in terms of people that have been impacted directly or indirectly. So opening up, making it a little bit more flexible than presently, because presently you have to have charged and prosecuted. But if we had opened it up to saying a parent, or maybe even want to say immediate family member, that had been prosecuted and or incarcerated for this, so that we're staying true to the original intent of this program, but still being a bit more flexible.
Is that for the business grants or
For the business grants, like maybe having it bring into alignment, as you suggest, on the training and education, bring it into alignment with what you're saying, which is the Michigan Social Equity Program. But for the business grants, have that be more truer to the original intent of the program, which is folks, residents who have been impacted directly or indirectly via an immediate family member by prohibition. Thoughts, commissioners?
I support that.
I think that sounds good, but just a question on that, Mayor, because all of it falls under the Social Equity Initiative, being subject to the prohibition of marijuana. And you're looking to say that the business startup grant should be, if I get you, understand you correctly, a more severe offense or conviction, more or less, opposed to the educational piece. Is that what you're saying?
So presently, right now, you have to have at least a misdemeanor offense to access these grants.
Right.
Any type of them.
Yep.
What has been suggested is that we model it after the state, which is if you are, in addition to an offense, just being a resident in a community. So that means I could qualify for these dollars, even though I may not have zero negative impact by prohibition. I could qualify for these dollars.
Yep.
And so, in the interest of educating and training our populace, I would say let's be more broadly accommodating and follow the state social equity program in that regard. But when it comes to business capital, where we're potentially giving considerably more, I think it's up to $25,000, considerably more capital for a startup business, that we keep that more focused on our residents who have been impacted specifically by prohibition, not just being a resident,
Right.
but have been specifically impacted by prohibition.
Okay. That makes sense. Yep. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any
One
thoughts
other,
or concerns or questions about that regard, Mr. Franzik?
no, that's good. I can work with that. One other thing I would like to clarify on the application is how often someone can be awarded.
Oh.
We did have one applicant that was qualified for one of the $5,000 grants. One of the grants allows you up to $10,000. I can give them two because they're 2 different years and there's actual funding available. I think that would be appropriate. Their business isn't off the ground yet. What we don't want to do is keep funding a business that's already opened. But I think, I would recommend that you're allowed up to $10,000 in funding, whether that's 2 $5,000 grants, one $10,000 one, or $5,000 one year, $5,000 the next year. That's the area we want to stick in. So if somebody's working towards it, they get a $5,000 grant for their architecture fees. They come back to us and say, there was a lot of things that needed to be changed. We still need $5,000 in equipment, but that's our last step. Could we have one more grant? I think it's worth us to invest that one additional grant. But I would say once you get past the $10,000, we probably want other applicants to access that money. Then again, if that money's sitting there at the end of the year and that business isn't open, then maybe there's a special request that they can come and ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if money's available at the end of the year or towards the end of the year, putting it to use. I can see that. Okay. Any questions or concerns on that? And I should clarify, when I mentioned up to $25,000 for the business startup, that is for a loan, not a grant.
Yep.
I misspoke when I said grant. That is a no interest loan that we could issue up to $25,000.
And with that one, well, the business startup grant, if you're going to be starting a business that's not marijuana related, yeah, I think we do need to keep in that stipulation that you or someone else got affected. Otherwise, essentially, it's open to anybody in Muskegon to start a business.
Yeah.
So make sure to make a note on those two, that those should criteria.
Wait, could you I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Could you repeat what you were?
Well, I think you had already covered is we want to be able to allow the education ones to be a little more flexible, but the other ones you're going to want to make
Okay.
sure.
So the business
They-
grant and loan
Yeah.
will be more focused. Okay.
Yeah, otherwise, it's really open to anyone who's
Okay.
lived here.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, that's the way it should be. Because I'm like, I shouldn't automatically be able to access these dollars just by virtue of me being a resident here, and I've never been negatively impacted. So yeah, I think we should stay more focused.
Honoring the spirit of the intent. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So you got everything you're looking to hear from the commission tonight, Mr. Forensic?
Nope, that was just the social equity. We got.
Oh
one
yeah,
more
we got
piece.
ordinance modifications.
Yep. So, we held the joint planning commission city commission meeting on August 4th. We discussed a few things. I put in the agenda from that meeting, and I put in red text some things that came up. So we had initially talked about potential caps on licenses, and I have the list of retail stores that are open or opening soon in Muskegon and the grow operations. And right now in Muskegon, if you are a consumer of marijuana, it is a great time. The prices are plummeting, and a lot of the companies are really concerned about what we can do about that. A lot of them have mentioned caps. In addition, since this meeting, I've talked to a few other industries, companies as well, and they're really concerned. They're pushing a cap. Honestly, I'm not sure what that's going to do in the immediate time here, because there's definitely a bidding war, for pricing going on. There's a couple that are really undercutting the rest of the people. I don't know what we can do about that. Caps will ultimately help in the long run. Well, I'll mention this company just because I've been talking with them, and they said I could use their name, but Bella Soul, they're kind of hurting. They're I think may have been one of our first, second
They were our second
store. And they've sold owners past year. The new owners are hurting pretty badly, and I talked to the woman that runs it, and she said, you got to have a cap. You got to have a cap. And this was last Thursday, and then I talked to her husband on Monday, and he was like, well, we own all the suites in that zone. If we put a cap on growing and I want to lease to a grower, does that mean I might not be able to rent it to a grower? And I said, well, if the cap was already met, yeah. So it's tough to decide what to do, because if, we put a cap on growers, that might help the existing growers, but it might hurt one of the existing building owners who may be working with a grower to go in and help subsidize some of those costs. So I don't really have a great answer of what to do. There's a thought of letting the free market play out. That's tough to do when you have 11, 12 businesses that are hurting. So, putting a cap, I think, on retailers is probably a good idea. You have to think about, we opened up the marijuana overlay district a few years ago, and there are some companies that spend a lot of money on property, and they may have had projects that fell by the wayside, but they still may be working on things, or they may just be in a holding pattern right now until something opens up. Consider, the mayor and I, we discussed after the meeting, or during that meeting, that could we put a cap throughout the city and not have it go into effect for like a year. And you can certainly do that. I talked to Schreier. We could just have the ordinance not go into effect for a year, so everybody would know. Then I don't know if it's just a rush to get your application in. And
So what I was thinking of when we had that conversation wasn't necessarily caps per se. I'm not sure how I feel about caps. It was the prospect of extending cannabis operations throughout the city based upon underlying zoning. So if you've got a business zoning that is conducive to retail, then we would allow it there across the city. But that out of recognition of the cannabis district that we have currently, that we've kind of forced all of these businesses, and then premiums, costs went up, and so they've paid a lot to give them time to recoup their investment, not have that extension of zoning throughout the city go into effect until such and such time in the future. So we're very clearly telegraphing this is where we're going as a city. Be prepared. I'm not 100% there. I think ultimately that's where we need to go as a city. It's where I would have liked to have gone from the beginning when we created the local regulatory environment for our medicinal cannabis, then recreational cannabis, was to do it based on underlying zoning, not have specified overlay districts. But what we have is what we have, and we need to be mindful of that and what the implications are to the businesses and the operators within that district and districts, because we've been adding a district here and a district there. But I do think ultimately we need to treat it as any other business and extend it based upon underlying zoning, which I think aligns with the spirit of the 2018 now. 2018 is when I forget which proposition it was that passed, Prop 2 or whatnot, but where the ballot measure was approved overwhelmingly in the state of Michigan and in our city by nearly 2/3, if I recall correctly, in the city of Muskegon, that cannabis be handled and regulated and treated similarly to tobacco and alcohol. And so extending it across the city based upon underlying zoning and appropriate underlying zoning seems to align with that spirit. How we get there, how quickly we get there, remains to be seen. And that's where you're looking for us to give you direction as to how to proceed. Because I think if we go that route, we need to do that carefully, methodically, and in concert with our community. And having those conversations on the ground with our residents, with property owners, with business owners, about getting to that point and how do we get to that point.
Yeah, I can tell you the existing businesses wouldn't like that idea. I do think it aligns with the intent of Proposal 2, though. Just thinking out loud, I don't know if your thought was to have caps on that as well, but if it does, then we really got to be careful about how we move that forward. We saw a lot of lawsuits in other communities on lottery systems, and I just don't think there's a good way to do that with a cap, and I think that does leave us, lawsuits.
And that's where the cap conversation came into play, is extending it elsewhere, and that was one idea suggested for a number of different reasons, but one of which was with regard to the lessening the impact on the existing businesses, but also so that the entirety of our city does not get overrun with these operations, which I think is going to be less and less of a probability considering we're already at market saturation, and it's costly to get into this type of business. But I'm particularly, maybe we tiptoe into this similarly to what we did previously with medicinal and then got into recreational. Maybe we first allow medicinal provisioning, although most that are going to be doing medicinal provisioning or want to do recreational, and medicinal provisioning is kind of falling by the wayside. But I am keen on making it, just as I was in the very beginning back in 2015 into 2016 when we adopted the medicinal was about our patient residents getting access to the medicine that they need, and doing so in a easily, conveniently, in a safe and well-regulated environment. So that's why I'm more keen also about extending it elsewhere, because not everyone necessarily in our city can easily get to our primary overlay district. One of the reasons why we did extend it to PEC was because there was a bus line at least that went through there. So I don't know. Thoughts, questions, concerns, commissioners? What do you think on this topic? Vice Mayor German.
Yeah, Mayor, I agree with you on the part about including owners, public. I think it's buy-in. and have a conversation with them. They know the business much better than we do, first of all. And I knew this was going to happen, where, competition and the saturation here of these dispensaries. Now some are hurting, but you got to remember, when we opened this up, it was only a selected few that could actually participate and able to be in the business. And now that it's open, you have others coming in that want to partake in it. And I think to change the rules of engagement, in the middle of the game, now that they have an opportunity, and that was the whole purpose, is to allow others to get into the business of marijuana. But I think we definitely should have some buy-in from owners and the public, and I guess the experts as well, and help give Mr. Franzik some direction, and that would better educate us as well. I mean, because they're the ones that's out there doing the business and feeling the pinch on their pocketbooks or wallets. So that's just my thought.
Thank you, Vice Mayor German.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other thoughts right now? Commissioner St. Clair.
I feel like this is a situation that we are not going to have an elegant solution that leaves everyone whole and happy, because there has been so much expense and saturation already. I think that we have dug ourselves into a bit of a ditch, and it's going to be difficult to reimagine what this can look like without doing some harm to the current industry. But I think that we are in a ditch right now, and staying here is not going to help anyone. So, to Vice Mayor German's point, getting some more education and some conversation about, it sounds like the business owners aren't even necessarily in agreement with themselves, even within the same household unit. So I think, trying to get some more conversation and finding out, what do you need as a community of business owners, but what does the community on a whole need, and where can we come together and do the least amount of harm while setting a course that can be sustainable? Because what we have currently isn't sustainable. Nobody is going to be able to get into this business as it is right now. And we're trying to do this whole social equity program, while it is incredibly cost prohibitive to set up in the little districts that we have. I feel like we're sort of eating our tail, and maybe having some serious conversation about how do we go forward with knowing there will be harm. How do we mitigate that the best we can? I also had a question. Is there a limit, and maybe this isn't for you, this might be for someone else, is there a limit on how many liquor licenses we have in the community? I see some heads nodding.
I don't think so.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes,
other
there
than
is.
what's out there.
Population on the
Population
list.
is set by the state.
Yeah.
So there is precedent for caps
Yes.
with liquor, and if we're looking at this being equitable, I wonder, can we work that formula for, and maybe we're already saturated, I don't know. But is there a way to use the existing rubric to make it work for the marijuana industry in the same way that it works for the liquor industry? You can't just go out and start a bar or a liquor store without having a license, and there are only so many licenses. The market regulates itself. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I don't have an answer for you, though. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And it's a good point, because I mean, at the cannabis summit, it was pretty clear all the businesses wanted a cap. But if we make it more easy accessible for our residents, we're going to want to extend that. So, like you said, there's no good answer, but something's going to have to be done.
Yeah, and that came up during our joint City Commission Planning Commission meeting. If we were to extend this across the city, of implementing a type of cap system outside of the overlay district, so that's still kind of a no limit necessarily on the overlay district, but saying if there's going to be X number of limitations in this area of the city or that area of the city or that area of the city, what formula was going to be used was undecided.
Yeah, I did bring that up with Schreier as well. I said, can we put caps on licenses for certain geographical areas? Theoretically, we could, but we would need to have a really good reason in doing so.
Have you conferred with the Michigan Cannabis Regulatory Agency to see if they are in process of coming up with some kind of formula to put a cap on the number of licenses? And similar to how Lara, is it Lara that oversees or the Michigan Liquor Control Commission oversees those licenses?
I have not, but that's a good idea because I'd have to imagine they're discussing that.
Because they might be doing all the work for us, and we don't need to
Would be better.
reinvent the wheel, and they're going to be coming down with their own regulatory framework.
Yeah, I've not heard of any legislation drafting it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, if we do end up doing caps, it does need to be very clearly defined. Whatever the parameters, but very clearly defined and consistently applied, because it has been problematic in other communities and caused a number of time-consuming, costly lawsuits, which we don't want to get into.
I think there might be someone from the industry here. I don't know if you want to hear them speak or not, or move forward.
Sure. I mean, if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this item. Yep. We're going to have to get you to come up and provide your name and entity or organization you're with.
Asia Burns from Belisol. I just had some input. I know, like, as far as alcohol goes, doesn't the state sort of regulate the lowest possible price? I don't, like, you can't sell a liter of alcohol below a certain amount. If that was sort of the cap we could get into, so maybe like $5 a gram was the lowest a company could sell at. So that way you don't undervalue local growers, so companies couldn't undervalue the entire, like, create a bubble within the local market. And then as far as caps go, if you could just regulate the caps on sellers, but not necessarily local, like cultivators or growers or processors. So people could still open up cannabis-related businesses in the area without putting a huge strain on the economic sales.
Excellent. No, thank you. Appreciate your input.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I think that would solve a lot of problems if the state would come in and regulate the prices. That's not something we can do, but if they did, I don't think we'd have as much talk on caps and competition. And I think she's right about the other industries growing. The growers are hurting from all the retailers, but I don't think that's something we need to limit ourselves on growing because there's so much competition out there. But I don't think adding more growers to our area is going to hurt anything. I think it's
And certainly we would welcome processors and testing and transfer, because we don't have so many of those. We've got retailers and we got growers in our city. Which, by the way, just so we all understand too, the limitations on retailers, the financial impact on us also, just so that we're aware, it shouldn't be the guiding factor in our decision making, but the reimbursement to municipalities is based upon the number of retailers that you have. And so that how much did we end up getting again this past year? Was it $450? It was approximately $450,000. That was due to us having, I think it was 12, 11
Only 10 at the time,
10
so we'll
10 at
get
a
more
time.
next year.
So that was due to the number of retailers and micro businesses that we have. And so that's how they collect all of the excise tax revenues, goes to the state. The state then divvies it up amongst certain buckets that are held by the state or other agencies, and then they distribute the portion that goes to municipalities to the counties and the cities, towns, and villages that have, based upon the number of retailers and micro businesses that operate within their boundaries. So I just wanted all of us to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Not that this should hold us up from potentially capping, but know that when capping, we're also capping. We're also capping revenue coming to the city of Muskegon. But at the same time, if you've got an overabundance, an oversaturation, the market's going to adjust and kill off some businesses, and you're going to see a reduction. And we don't want to get to a point where we lose all of our businesses. We'd like businesses that invest in the city of Muskegon to be sustainable for long term, whether it's cannabis or otherwise, ideally. So, any other thoughts or any other questions? I mean, we know we got to get the signs in a second, but with regard to this item, is there anything else you're looking from the commission? Do you have further guidance or understanding of what next steps that you'll need to be taking and we need to be taking internally?
Yeah, I don't really know what the next step should see, but
So we're going to confer with the Cannabis Regulatory Agency just to get understanding and insights from them as to how they're proceeding.
I'll confer with them. Anything else you would like me to address?
We don't have, and we're missing a couple members of our commission. I don't think we can necessarily say this is the way that you should be moving forward with zoning, or
I could report back
Pursuing
next
a-
month. We'd have more info and let everybody think about it for another month.
okay.
Feel free to email me questions.
Do you think that we should have a special standalone meeting with regard to this topic and invite business owners and then invite the general community into the conversation to learn more about it, as well as to give us their perspectives?
I mean, it's always good information to take input. I think we've already gotten the input. We already know what the cannabis industry is going to say.
Yeah.
I believe I do. I'm not sure who to target to ask.
So I guess in terms of maybe of our neighborhoods, if we did want to extend it across our city based on underlying zoning, we're going to want to hear, and I can imagine we'll get, even though conceptually our city very much supports cannabis and allowing cannabis, both originally with medicinal and then with recreational, we do hear some pushback or concerns from some residents about an oversaturation of cannabis. And so I could imagine we'd hear that if we reached out to, this neighborhood or that neighborhood or this neighborhood, like, hey, we're thinking about extending the zoning to accommodate this across the city. What are your concerns? What are your fears? What are your wants? What are your wishes? We could get pushback, but we don't know that until we ask for that and understand that and then try to mitigate that. Maybe that's not extending it, or maybe that is coming up with an appropriate and clear cap system.
Yeah, I think I'd like to know. I mean, to your point, I think there is the sentiment right now that there's so many and it's oversaturated, but then there's this afterthought of like, well, the market's going to determine who's going to survive. But I would like to have that confirmed, I guess, by residents. And I think that could help us better direct how we support the existing dispensaries and decisions moving forward.
We'd have to be very careful
Yes.
in how we try to gather this information. Just dealing with this for so long, I know most people that are for things tend not to show up, and people that are not for things tend to. So I've held, over the years, a lot of cannabis-related talks and things, and mostly people saying they don't want it in their neighborhood. I think I've yet to meet someone that said I need one in my neighborhood because I have access to one in the cannabis for all of you. But if that's something you're hearing, I don't know, maybe we put out a poll or something. I mean, my fear is if we ask the community to, you know,
Yeah.
do you want these in your neighborhood, I think we're going to get a resounding answer. Quantify those answers, you know. And
So I was going to suggest that we bring to the planning commission this week and ask about doing a public hearing dedicated to this topic, to invite that feedback. But
how would we
I sense you're right that it's going to be lopsided, but not necessarily because that's a true reflection of where our community as a whole is, but it's just a nature of, we tend to hear more of the anti than people that are like, okay, I'm cool with that, or like, either, you know, people that are neutral aren't going to come out to say, like, yeah, I'm fine with that.
I just feel
People that are very pro cannabis and say, hey, this really should be across the city, or you should be here. We would hear some of that, I suspect. But I think you're right. The anti, like, keep this absolutely out of my city or out of my neighborhood, may be stronger. They may be more motivated to come out and voice their opinion.
Well, think about when we adopted the medical here, the zoning ordinance. Medical and recreational marijuana passed here by, was it 70%?
Medical was 75%. Yeah.
But how many people in favor of it came to our discussions? I don't think anybody did.
Oh no, we definitely had some. Oh yeah, there was definitely positive people. We had good to get them resonance. It was some of the institutions that were not so keen on it that came out and spoke against it. But I do recall we had a good number of residents who were like, yes,
That's true, yeah.
let's
yeah.
move this forward.
I don't know if, they got into the particulars of where we should put them, or maybe we didn't ask them, but
Oh yeah, I mean, it was more top level. It wasn't unless we get super nitty gritty on the zoning element of it. Yeah, I guess reach out to Cannabis Regulatory Agency, get a sense of where they're at, what their outlook is, and report back to the commission, and then we can take the time to further reflect on this in the meantime, and then hopefully give you some better guidance at that time as to how we'd like to proceed. I think Commissioner St. Clair is right, and we're not going to have a perfectly elegant solution. It's you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. And there's going to be people upset one way or another.
yeah, and just keep in mind, in the current overlay district, there are, like I said, a couple projects that I'm still working on that might come to fruition. A lot of them seem to die out, but we might have 10 or 11, 12 now, but there could easily be 14. They come back.
Now, another question that was answered, I believe, is we could, as part of this, and this is more of the Planning Commission, in terms of issuing a special permit for certain operations, but those can be revoked if no action has been taken within a set amount of time frame.
We don't give special permits. It's all used by right in the overlay district.
No, I'm not talking about the overlay district. I'm talking about the special permits that are issued by the Planning Commission for the micro businesses and the grows in the certain areas. What I'm getting at is there's 2 special use permits that have been issued, and those properties are for sale. And we intentionally, when we came up with a special use permit, was to get around people trying to profiteer off of this. And what I'm seeing is because we were told, oh, we're going to issue a permit that goes with the owner and the land. And so if you're selling it, that permit's not going with them. However, people love workarounds and figure out how to, work loopholes. What's happened is an LLC becomes the owner of the property, and then they sell the LLC with the property to someone else. And so by virtue, that permit then transfers. So getting around to what our intent was. And so what I'm wondering is, when we see something like that, or we see no use of that permit within a certain amount of time, that we say, no, that permit is null and void, it is revoked.
Yeah.
To try to lessen that incentive where they're just going to sell it.
Yeah, that was my next point, is going over these special use permits.
Oh, I got ahead of us then.
No, it's fine.
Perfect segue.
Yeah, so a special use permit, you're essentially approving the site plan, and a site plan's only good for a year until you do something. That's how I would interpret it, is that these should be.
Okay, I'm going to want to revisit. I know one of those properties I think is probably close to, if not over a year. So have to revisit that with you.
Get with our legal team and make sure that's. Next thing I want to talk about was the transportation and testing licenses. Those are the two types of uses in the overlay district that we don't have any of. Now they don't really need a lot to do these. My idea was to allow transportation and testing licenses as a use by right in anywhere. Other licenses, which is B2, B4, I1 and I2. Someone like Trace Analytical, who already does testing on various products. They're located in our industrial park with I2 zoning, so that would just be able to. Transportation, all you really need is that did come up in our joint meeting, is can you store it on just a vacant parking lot? Essentially, yeah, you could under the state law, but all deliveries have to be made in, I think, either 48 or 72 hours. So it's very doubtful anybody would ever leave parking lot. Just one, that's probably a bad idea, and two, you're probably not going to meet your deadline. So my idea would be to allow those as well as use by right. Now, I would say for the transportation, we allow it as a use by right if they have a building you can store it in. If they want to just do it in a vacant parking lot, I think they got to come to us for a special use permit, and they got to show us that it's a secured lot. But again, opening it up to all these different zoning districts, because for the most part, no one's really gonna ever know that business. So if the commission is in agreement, I would suggest to bring that forward at a planning commission date.
I'm in agreement with that. I see nodding heads. Any objections? All right, we're good on that.
Okay. Marijuana signage is going to the planning commission on Thursday. I felt strong enough from the joint meeting that everyone was kind of on board with the marijuana signage to make that the same as any other business, not to regulate the types of words on it or pictures or anything like that. Minimal size requirements. It's a lot less than other industries, which doesn't seem fair. So I think everyone was in agreement just to have the signs follow the underlying zoning.
Sounds good.
Similar.
On the topic of signage, though, can we communicate to all of our cannabis operators that yard signs put in right-of-ways and terraces and whatnot are unacceptable?
We're working on that one, and yeah, one of them's got away with us, but we're certainly get.
Okay. Yeah, I know that there was another operator from outside of our city starting to populate across our city their signs, which I did relay to DPW, and they've been, as they see them along with other signs that are improper, have been taking them down. But I've noticed a ripple effect where that non-city operator that has signs all over has prompted some of our city operators to then follow suit and start popping up their signs all over the place too. And so I don't want us to have a war of signs across our city between cannabis operators.
Yep, we'll start addressing that one a little more strictly.
Okay, thank you.
And also going to planning commission or marijuana drive-throughs. This is something a lot of the cannabis see at the joint meeting. Staff put together a proposal to allow them as a use by right with certain conditions for stacking spaces and making sure you can. In talking a little more with some of our staff, I think we're going to request at the meeting maybe an amendment to that, because I think there's a lot of concerns when you have very popular drive-throughs, and this, we haven't seen this in the marijuana industry yet, obviously, but there's some drive-throughs in the city. They have a large backup, and we don't want to see that. I think that's our main fear with allowing this in the marijuana industry, is that people want to hit the drive-through rather than going outside, and then we're going to see people stacking out on the street, even if it's account for. I think we really want them to come prepared with a traffic study to show that it's not going to impact that. So I think we're going to possibly propose that this goes to a special use permit, and that way if a company wants to do it, they fill out the paperwork, hold the public hearing, and they come prepared with that traffic study, and we will have a list of criteria we want that study to address. And staff will review it and give a recommendation to the commission, sufficient or not.
To the planning commission, and then if the problems do present themselves, there'll be an opportunity to revoke that special use permit.
And I think that's a good thing to have on any type of, we don't have a lot of regulations on any of our drive-throughs, so that's something I'm going to put my attention to next. Make that a requirement for every drive-through and every.
Okay. I think that's a sensible approach. Commissioners, do you have any concerns with that? You okay with proceeding as such? All right. Excellent.
Okay, so I have direction on the transportation and testing licenses. Talk about revoking special use permits. It is something we're probably also going to want to maybe spend some more time on, is these special use permits. You know, I don't think it's doing what we intend to do. And like you're saying, we're seeing some people try to flip these properties. So it's an important thing to address if we're talking about putting caps in the overlay district. That's something we have to look at for these special use permits too, because that's some way to circumvent the cap is by going the micro business route. Those would still be the same amount of competition for our retailers.
Mm-hmm.
Something we're going to have to consider as well. Other than that, I think I have what I need, so thank you.
Excellent. So I got stymied on one aspect of it, but you got direction and guidance on everything else.
Yep. All right, I'll be back next month.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Yep, thanks.
Appreciate your work. All right, next up, Pure Marquette Parking and Boardwalk Improvements, an update from our DBW Director, Leo Evans. Welcome, welcome.
Good evening.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I'll take you back to January of 2022 was the last time we talked about this. At the January meeting, I believe we presented this on the work session and the first meeting in January. We did bring a proposal to hire DLZ to do the engineering work for the site. The commission had reviewed the proposal that was given and asked for a few modifications, revisions, and kind of given staff authorization to sort that out. Took us till about April to get that all done and in place. So that was signed and entered into, and work began. They did complete their survey work on the site in June and July. So we do have physical survey for all the areas that were requested. And now today, with the packet, I do have some very preliminary design plans that are created from that we can go through quickly. And then I just wanted to talk about what the next steps should be for this project going forward. So, thank you, Ann. What you see here is the south end of the project. It looks very similar to the last versions we've seen. This is a single row of one-way double angle parking, a 16-foot wide non-motorized pathway made of concrete. We do have the trees all being preserved in this scenario. You can see the notch outs for parking spaces that are lost to make sure we've got enough root room for all of those. And really, like I said, that one does not look much different than what you've seen before. This area represents somewhere just below about 100 additional spaces. I can't remember the exact count. I had it written on my desk and I forgot to bring that piece of paper. But again, that area is kind of largely changed. So I'll ask for the next sheet, please. This is a new one for you. This is what we term the Ovals parking lot. This is the parking lot right across the street from the bathhouse. That was part of that engineering study. There was a real rough concept drawing included back in January, but this kind of puts a little more numbers to it with an official survey. What this is around 100 to 120 additional parking spaces in this lot, and then it also envisions taking that Indiana Street right away and making that into more of a promenade for chalets or other opportunities. We did leave it a little bit blank in this sense. You know, it's more of a white box feel at this point, just to say this is the available space, but how we determine to use it is really still up for grabs. The width that's there does not encroach any on the dune, but it doesn't, if we add another row of parking, we don't gain anything. So it is a pretty wide space. I think you'll note somewhere in there it's like 44 feet wide. We had kind of envisioned the chalets being on the north half of that, with their pressed up closer to the dune with a sidewalk behind them that would just allow us room to do maintenance of the sand and make sure those, you know, don't get swallowed up someday. And then a larger promenade out front, which would be available for food trucks and mobile type operations. Trying to make sure I didn't miss nothing else. And this one as well, you'll note the trees all stay in that area. Oh yeah, this is a little bit closer area. Zoomed up of that Indiana Street. We did preserve all the trees that are within that Ovals parking lot as well. You know, we showed some landscape planners, but really, like I said, that's kind of a white box space that we really envision probably needing some more engagement and refinement to narrow down what that looks like. What kind of utility amenities we want to offer in that area. You know, do we want to offer power hookups, water, sewer, you know, those kind of things to support those uses there. We did also add some screening down at the end closest to the Ovals, just because you've got that the fire department barn down there, and we've also got that trash compactor down there as well. So just trying to maybe break that up a little bit so that's not part of, you know, it's still there, still functional, but not as part of your visual sightline when you're in the area. And could you go, I think it might have been back on that last page, and I missed it a little bit. Zoom out just a little bit or scroll down to the bottom of that. I just wanted to show some of the work that's around the bathhouse right there, just up, just a shade. And then over to the right. So the 16-foot wide path ends at the existing bathhouse, and then we did also include a concrete path that goes out towards the water in lieu of the temporary seasonal one that we set up every year. We didn't extend it all the way to the water. I believe that little T-head at the end there was set at 1 foot above the high water mark that we saw from 2 years ago, just so we're trying to keep that above the high water mark so we're not fighting with erosion or anything crazy on that site, but make that a little bit more of a permanent amenity most of the way down. It'll also make it easier for us to maintain if it's concrete and wide enough for us to drive our tractors on and things like that. Thanks. Can you go down to the 2 pages? 2 pages. So we also included a cost estimate. This is real preliminary. We haven't gone through it in detail yet, and it does not include a lot of amenities for that Indiana Street area. So there is some contingency included. I was pretty happy to see when we actually added it all up, it was a bit less than what we had thought it was going to be back in January. We had talked about a number somewhere between $2 and $3 million being the likelihood. With where we're at right now, we're at about $1.5 million. So a lot of questions still to be answered for sure, and a lot of time can take place between now and when we go to bid this project that can add volatility to that, but it was good to see, at least for a start, we're in that range. I will say for the current fiscal year, we have $200,000 budgeted for this project. Of that, around $70,000 is just the engineering expenses, so there's not a great deal of money to undertake any construction in the current sense with this project. So really, I think we want to just kind of keep moving forward slowly with this design. I think we're at a stage that if there's a desire of the commission or staff or anyone to have us take this out to the community for a more, you know, open engagement, maybe around that Indiana Street piece, especially since that'll be new for a lot of people, we could probably do that. We could probably start to also apply for our Eagle permit, which will be going through the state this time, and we're going to they're going to ask us to follow their special use process, so that'll be a much longer permit process. But I think we've, you know, with this general framework, we've got a good enough handle on the design that we could start that process and then refine it as we go for those little adjustments. That's about all I have to share right now.
All right, excellent. Thank you for bringing this update to us. I know some of us have been getting questions like, where's this project stand? When we had last reviewed it early this year, we were expecting to either start getting started this fall or this spring. Doesn't look like we're going to be doing it this spring. Is that what I'm understanding, since we don't have it in the budget presently? Or are we looking at potentially identifying additional resources or committing additional resources to get this project started in the spring?
Yeah, we haven't really thought about that too far yet.
Okay.
Like I said, we're just trying to get through the design right now. I will somewhat have to defer to Leanne and the new city manager and the commission. If that's, your wishes to take this project forward, we would have to identify more funding for it. We did talk before, this project can be phased. We can pick pieces of this to build now and pieces to build later too.
Okay.
So that could also be a portion of it. It's not called out in that estimate, but I would believe that the piece, the one-way, two-way parking is around $1 million, and the ovals in Indiana Street's probably around $500,000. So, think of that in 2/3 and 1/3 type scenario if we wanted to parse that off and do a smaller section now. If we got a permit's good for 5 years, so we could get a permit for the whole project, do part now, do part later.
Okay, yeah, that seems sensible. No, I appreciate you bringing this back to us, and the care and attention that you've given to preserving and protecting those trees, which is wonderful to see. And I like the inclusion of the promenade. That, and like you said, it's white boxing it. We're laying the groundwork for what can be created there. And that's where I think we need to have some more follow-up and engagement with the community of, do we want it to be all chalets? Do we want it to be chalets and food trucks? Do we want it to just be food trucks? Do we want this, that? Like, do we want lights strung up or not? Like, getting some more of the feedback on the particulars of how do we program that. But I like that we're laying the groundwork to do so here. And then the reconfiguration of the parking and adding of the handicap parking with the load and unload zone as well in between. That's convenient. I would like to know at some point, just conceptually, how we would extend the pathway, the non-motorized pathway. How do we extend that on the other side of the concession stand and other side of the bathhouse? And how do we continue it to, say, Margaret Elliott Park?
I know when we discussed in January, that was part of the original proposal, and that was the piece that we negotiated to pull out. We did complete the physical survey of that area, so we could do some conceptual type work in that area, but we did not order or detail any design yet. But.
Okay. Yeah, and we were intentional about not wanting to commit to that at the time.
Right.
You're right, that's why we pulled it out.
Yep.
Because that does merit further consideration, not only by the commission, but with our community to understand. And it's good that we got that data in the survey to help us have an informed conversation around that. And what does that look like? And what are the impacts from extending that? Or do we just stop here? But I think that the existing, was it 5-foot sidewalk through there?
I think it might have been 5 or 6 foot.
It is insufficient. We all know that. So, commissioners, do you have any questions? Do you have any remarks or comments? Commissioner Emery.
I too want to thank you for saving the trees and doing that workaround. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. And we were intentional about that, but I like that. And what you brought back here was those additional notches or carve outs where we're sacrificing. We already knew we were going to sacrifice some parking, but it looks like you're even sacrificing more parking in order to create sufficient barrier around the trees so they're not having potential negative impacts to the root structure. And so I'd like to see that. And if there's, I don't know if DPW is taking any extra steps, knowing how important those trees are to many people in our community, but whether with pruning or extra care with those trees, some of which are in better shape than others, but they're all important. and what we can do to help preserve. Because what I see them as being symbolic of Muskegon, and that they're survivors. They survive in challenging conditions, and that's what we are, Muskegon. We have survived challenging conditions over the years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, well, I like to hear that it's less expensive than you originally envisioned.
Yeah.
I like what you brought back to us to take a look at. How can we, in terms of accessibility down to the waterfront? I like that we're making that permanent. We've got that a permanent concrete pathway down closer to the waterfront. Doesn't get quite to the waterfront, but have we given some thought to what additional elements or amenities we might be able to provide to get folks that are differently abled to the waterfront and are into the water? I mean, I've seen different tools to do so.
We purchased
and equipment. So
we purchased I forget the brand name of it, but it's a rollable mat that you can roll out. That's designed to kind of serve that purpose in a easier to install temporary setup. We didn't get it until a little bit later in this year, so we didn't get a chance to put it out. But our vision is to try it at Harbortown Beach at that location, where the environment's a little bit softer and easier on it, and see how it holds up there, having that extend all the way down to the water's edge, and then possibly pilot something like that. I've not seen many other communities that I can recall right on the Great Lakes undertake anything quite like that. It's definitely a tough environment to build something for in that sense. So.
Okay, great. We did get that mat then.
We did.
Wonderful.
It came in much later than we hoped, but we'll have it ready for next year. So we put in the ADA crosswalk at Harbortown this year and got it ready for it, but never had a chance to get it out.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the version you acquired, but the one that I talked about before is the Moby mat.
Yes, that is
so.
right.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, happy to see that get used and enjoyed.
Good.
So thank you. Any other questions or remarks, commissioners? So then, what's your outlook then? Like, you said that in terms of bidding it out, like you're going to revisit this conversation with the commission and about potentially allocating more resources this fiscal year, or we're just going to be looking at how do we accommodate this in next fiscal year budget, or that's all TBD?
I think it's a little bit to be determined. We'd like, we kind of wanted to hear that this design is still heading in the right direction. There wasn't anything big hiccups, changes, different opinions to take into account. I envision us finishing this design, doing a little bit better estimate on it, and really nailing that price down. Probably need to do some work on that white box area, Indiana. If that's going to be something we look to build earlier, we need to flesh out a lot of those details sooner than later, and those will all have cost implications too. So I think my vision is our next step is just to take that design further, probably have some kind of community engagement meeting where we help refine what that Indiana Street corridor should look like, and then we decide if there's a desire to try to allocate some funds for it yet this spring. We can possibly do that. I think we can probably already apply for the permit based on what we have here. I think we've got enough baseline data to know what our impacts to the critical dune area is, right? I know how much surface area we're impacting, how many cubic yards of sand, all that good stuff. It's just the details that still need to be kind of sorted out, which won't impact that in a big way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, we would certainly have, if it's something to undertake sooner than later, we'd have to find some additional resources for it.
All right, so this would be coming back to us for consideration of allocating those resources, then doing a bid, bidding it out, which again we would approve each step of the way. So
Be a lot more opportunities on the way.
All right. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing this update to us. Like I said, I've been hearing some questions from folks who are like, wait, where's this at? What's the timeline? Is this happening? Is it not happening or whatnot? So it's good to get those updates. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, Parks and Recreation reorganization. Or shall we say organization? It's a new department. A revived department.
It is. So, as you know, we've had a team that's been working on looking at what the organization for Parks and Rec could be and what the impacts then would be to our clerk's office, because there have been some functions that overlap between DPW and clerk. And so we had a follow-up meeting, got the group back together to talk about, probably talk about more events than anything else, because that is where we tend to have a lot of overlap. So our thoughts as a group are that until we could get additional funding for additional staff, it really makes sense to leave the events, at least the city-run events, with the clerk's office. You may be aware that we currently have 2 event planner positions in the clerk's office. But when we work on events, it's not just those 2 people that are working on the events. It really is the entire clerk's office. Excuse me. And so once we start this new Parks and Rec department, if we transferred those 2 event planners over to DPW, they really wouldn't have the help that they would need to get these events off the ground and make them successful, unless we were suddenly going to devote some DPW staff to doing that work instead of having them do what they currently do. So our proposal is that we have this kind of interim step where we hire the new department head that has been included in the budget. And we still look at these 3 arms that go with the Parks and Rec department, where we have parks maintenance. We have some functions that are currently under one of our DPW supervisors with cemetery, forestry, marina, and campground. And then we have this 3rd arm that is about recreation programming and special events coordination. So, you know, Ms. Ernie was here earlier talking to us about special event coordination. Those are the events that would remain at DPW, and she would continue to do that work of coordinating for all those special events. And then we envision that recreation programming would start with working with agencies and programs that are already in existence for like Port City football and disc golf leagues and things like that, so that we can coordinate with them and, maybe get the word out, help them get the word out to people. Maybe we can start looking at ways that we can assist these programs, but not necessarily take on the development and complete organization of all of the recreation programming. So it's just a way to kind of step into this and see how we can start to partner and then learn from those processes. We also talked about the Western Market and the Farmers Market. In previous conversations, we had thought that those 2 items could move to this new Parks and Rec department. And as we continued talking about those 2 things that are what I refer to as our incubators, there are a number of places that they could go. That could be in economic development, that could remain with the clerk's office. There's certainly some conversation about keeping those functions at City Hall, just because they're downtown and City Hall is downtown. So ultimately, we decided that since there wasn't really a definite, this makes the most sense, that we really should just leave it where it is. It's working great. So that's our plan. So you'll see that I put together these slides, and so we've got an interim plan for the Parks and Rec department, and then we've got a future plan. So the future plan does include having the city events and this neighborhood attendant program that we've discussed included in this new department. What we thought we would do is, once we get this new Parks and Rec manager, department head, I'm not exactly sure what the title is, on board, we can have that person working with the clerk's office on these events to just really better understand them. And then we can have further conversations about, does it make sense to gradually move those over to this Parks and Rec department, or is there maybe something else will reveal itself as a different way to approach that? So for now, we think that eventually it makes sense to have all the events happening in the Parks and Rec department at some point in the ultimate future. But we may change our minds as we take on the work and see how it goes. And so you'll see that I've got an interim slide for the clerk's office that shows the city events still there. I think that's really the only difference is the city events are there and then they're not there. So this is what we're proposing moving forward. And we do have, we've already got a drafted job description for the Parks and Rec department head position. And our hope is that we'll hear some consensus from you on moving forward so that we can get that to civil service in November and then advertise that position. We talked a while ago when we were in the budgeting process that we would aim for this fall to have that position open. So happy to have your input.
Excellent. Well, thank you for providing this update, and you and the team working on taking those steps to revive our Parks and Recreation department. I'm excited to see that come into fruition. So thank you for your work on that. Commissioners, do you have any questions or remarks on this item? Vice Mayor German.
Yeah, thank you. This is Mike Zell. Is there a job description already set for this job right now, or is that something that is going to be done later?
It's drafted right now.
Okay.
We were waiting for this meeting to occur so that we could make sure we were on the right path.
Okay. And I guess requirements or qualifications, what would that be? Background in Parks and Recreations, or
For sure.
Bachelor's of Science or something like that?
Leah, maybe Mr.
Would you like
our deputy, our DPW director can tell us. He's the one that wrote it.
Yeah. And is it a
That's my
position to be
memory.
shared?
I believe it did require a bachelor's degree in natural resources or recreation management or related field. You know, if there's something out there that we're not missing. We pulled one from the city of Marquette and modeled it pretty similar on what the city of Marquette had in their recreation programming, at least in terms of, you know, criteria and screening what we were looking for.
I feel like we also included a requirement for 5 years of experience.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And you're planning on bringing that to Civil Service Commission in November, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Can you distribute that with the commission in the meantime?
Sure.
Just let me, so that he can see and the
Mm-hmm.
rest of us can see exactly, you know, what your requirements are and what the job descriptions are, and so we have that on for our personal knowledge, and
Mm-hmm.
if we feel so inclined, we can give you any additional input, even though it's not our individual responsibility for crafting those, but we have the Civil Service Commission that reviews that in concert with staff's recommendation. But at least we can ask questions and perhaps give you our thoughts at the same time.
Right. At this time,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
maybe this may be on your mind. At this time, we have included in the job description all of these things, and I think even including the farmers market and the Western market, just in case we move to that in the future. So those are included as potential pieces or functions that the position would have to manage. But it will be up to us as leadership to determine, you know, when that would happen, or if.
And just one last question, because I was looking at the flow chart here, because I noticed Director Evans was up here under the Parks and Recreation future, and I guess and Director Grant for the Finance Department. I mean, how are those two different, or how do they interact with each other? I guess
It's the clerk's office that operates under
finance.
Ken Grant's Finance and Administration Division, and then our Parks Maintenance presently and subsequently when we revive our Parks and Recreation Department will operate under the DPW, or at one point we called it Municipal Service Division, another point Public Works Division, and I'm not sure where we settled on what the official title is, but essentially DPW.
PBW, okay. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this revival?
I think this looks great, and I'm excited to see us moving forward.
Yay.
Yes.
Indeed.
Any particular input on the event, since that was the thing that we were kind of had the most conversation about?
Yeah, I like that we're not being quick to move it, that we're going to keep the city events separate on the interim basis, and then the special events coordination does make sense to me that that's under Parks and Recreation. And then reassessing, like getting a director for Parks and Recreation, getting all those other responsibilities, underway and understood, and then reassessing, should we move over city events here as well, or is there a strong rationale to keep it where it is? It's working and functioning well as is. But I also understand the conversations with you that staff will be internally assessing and reevaluating how and what events we do as a city ourselves, and how do they function? Do they meet what objectives do they meet? And should modifications or tweaks happen, inclusive of whether they need to be moved to a different division. So I think that's a worthwhile endeavor in and of itself. Personally, commissioners, your thoughts?
I agree.
Great.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Unless there's anything else, we're going to go to public comment. At this 8 o'clock hour, I only see staff left.
If any of the staff would like to make public comment.
So, yes. Mr. Dave Alexander, welcome up. You have up to 3 minutes to provide your remarks.
Commissioners, Dave Alexander, Business Development Manager. I just want to make a comment concerning the extension of the pathway beyond the current location that you've seen there at Pierre Marquette Park. That when you get to the deck, there's issues, but also when you get beyond the deck, there's issues with the volleyball courts and how that would configure in, and how that may, depending on how it was done, you may end up losing courts, and you may end up losing your operator for that. So, but it has been put on hold, as you did the last meeting back in January, December when we did it. So this is into the future, but understand that when you get there, those will be issues that you'll have to address with those operators of that event and of the operation.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, those are the conflicts in usage and programming that prompted me to say, hey, let's separate that. Let's not be, quick or hastily move into that, and give more consideration and discussion with the different users that are impacted by it, and our residents in general. So, yes, certainly we got to keep that top of mind going forward. So, commissioners, unless there's anything else, maybe there's something on tomorrow's general session that you want to touch base or bring up right now? No? So unless there's anything else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Emmy, supported by Commissioner St. Clair to adjourn. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. Take care and be well.